The twin moons of Eco 17 hung low in the violet sky, casting silver beams through the wide glass window of Cavara's quarters. She lay curled on the narrow bed, her crimson skin glowing faintly in the dim light, long strands of silver hair tumbling across her shoulders like liquid metal. The barren ridges of the planet stretched out in jagged silhouettes beyond the glass, but her attention was fixed on the datapad in her lap. She had been scrolling through the human database again, endlessly fascinated by the odd little customs of a species so wildly emotional and unpredictable. A smile tugged at her lips as she read aloud softly to herself, words that sounded both alien and enticing on her tongue. The sound of the door sliding open broke her concentration. Commander Will Travis leaned against the frame, his tall form still encased in the heavy combat armor that had been his second skin for months. His short brown hair was damp with sweat from patrol, his face set in the rugged, disciplined lines of a soldier, yet his gray-blue eyes softened when they found her. Cavara sat up quickly, tucking her legs beneath her pale gray pajamas, her curiosity already sparking. "You always look like you've carried half the planet on your shoulders," she teased, her voice lilting like a melody. "That's because I probably have," Will answered with a grin, stepping inside and removing his helmet. He placed it carefully on the table, his broad shoulders relaxing just slightly now that he was in the quiet safety of her quarters. Her smile widened as she tilted her head, silver hair spilling forward. "Tell me something, Commander. These human customs, they are so strange. I've been reading about your rituals of courtship and, well..." She hesitated, enjoying the way his brow furrowed with suspicion. "Your mating positions. They have such colorful names," Will chuckled, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, I suppose we get creative with terminology." Her eyes gleamed, curious and bright. "Like what?" He shifted, clearly torn between amusement and restraint, but the spark in her eyes was irresistible. "Well, there's missionary, cowgirl, reverse cowgirl." Cavara let out a laugh like the chiming of crystal bells, clutching her datapad as if it might steady her. "Those sound absurd. Do humans actually call them this?" "Afraid so," he admitted, with a smirk. Her laughter lingered like music in the air. She leaned closer, teasing, testing him, and then he hesitated, his smile turning mischievous. "Then there's doggy style." The words hung in the air between them, heavier than they should have been. Cavara's laughter burst forth again, light and unrestrained. Doggy style. What in the galaxy could that possibly mean? Will opened his mouth to answer, but she was already moving. With playful grace, Cavara slipped from the bed and dropped onto all fours on the mattress, her silver hair falling like a veil around her face. She looked back at him over her shoulder, eyes wide with innocent curiosity, like your Earth canines. For a moment, Will forgot to breathe. The sight of her in that position, playful, radiant, utterly unaware of the effects and heat rushing through him. His armor suddenly felt too tight, his throat too dry. He managed to rasp out, "Yeah, something like that." Her expression shifted as the meaning dawned. Her crimson cheeks deepened to a darker shade, and she quickly sat back on her heels, her hair falling to hide her embarrassment. "Oh," she whispered, the sound small, vulnerable. "Oh." The silence that followed was thick, charged, as though the very air between them vibrated with unspoken tension. Will rubbed the back of his neck, searching for words that wouldn't shatter the fragile balance. "I should probably. Would you like some tea?" she blurted, almost desperately. The tension cracked, and both of them laughed, relief rushing in with the sound. Cavara pressed a hand to her lips, shaking her head, while Will grinned despite the flush on his face. "Tea would be great," he said warmly. She rose quickly, retreating to the small kitchenette, where she busied herself with the task of brewing. The purple liquid her people considered soothing. Will sank into the chair, unlatching his gauntlets with deliberate slowness, stealing glances at her graceful movements. He knew he should let the moment fade, bury it beneath routine and protocol. Yet the image of her on all fours lingered, carved into his mind with dangerous clarity. When she returned with 2 steaming cups, their fingers brushed as she handed him his. That faint contact sent a spark rushing through both of them. She tucked herself opposite him, her lips curving into a smile she tried to hide behind the rim of her cup. "Your species," she murmured softly, her eyes dropping shyly to the table, "is endlessly fascinating. So strong in body, and so complicated in emotion." Will studied her in the warm glow of the cabin lights, his heartbeat steady and strong. "And yours isn't." Cavara's gaze flickered to meet his, silver lashes trembling. "We value logic, efficiency. Emotion is secondary." "Then maybe," Will said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers, "you're a poor example of your people." She smiled, shy and luminous, and something shifted in the space between them. The humor of the earlier moment lingered, but now it pulsed beneath the surface with something more dangerous, more intimate. Neither of them said it aloud, but they both felt it. A joke had just opened a door that neither was ready to close. The air outside the station carried a restless weight that evening, the kind that pressed against the skin and whispered of storms, yet unseen. Echo 17 was always harsh, but tonight the winds seemed to stir with more than dust and static. "Commander," Will Trevez tightened the straps on his combat armor as the expedition team prepared at the docking bay. His pulse rifle hung heavy at his side, familiar as breath. Cavara appeared from the corridor, silver hair tied back, her scanner cradled against her chest. The usual calm precision in her crimson features carried a faint crease of unease. She walked straight to him, her presence commanding his attention before she spoke a word. "Readings in the southern quadrant are unstable," she said softly, her gaze flicking toward the armored transport waiting for them. "Mineral interference, perhaps, or something else." Will gave a curt nod. "Then we confer with our own eyes. Stay close to me out there." The words slipped out with more weight than he intended, but Cavara only inclined her head, though the faintest trace of color touched her cheeks. She had learned to read his concern for what it was protect, not patronizing. The expedition moved out, the alien sun sinking low behind jagged black ridges. The barren wastes stretched endlessly, sharp rocks and deep ravines cutting the land like scars. Every sound seemed magnified. The crunch of boots on stone, the whine of scanners, the hum of the wind. Cavara's voice broke the silence, measured but faintly tense. "Interference levels spiking. Something is wrong." Before Will could answer, a screech split the air, shrill, hungry, and unmistakable. His fist shot up, signaling halt. The sound echoed once, then multiplied, until dozens of inhuman cries poured from the ravines. "Skrill," Hayes shouted, already raising his rifle. The swarm boiled over the ridge like living nightmares. 6-limbed predators, their black exoskeletons gleaming with iridescent oil under the dying light. Mandibles clicked as they scuttled forward with unnerving speed. "Defensive formation," Will barked, his voice cutting clean through the panic. Blue energy bolts flashed as rifles opened fire, tearing into the creatures. Screeches answered, furious and endless. "There's too many," Rodriguez shouted, firing desperately as the wave closed in. Will's mind raced, instinct sharp, fall back to the transport. "Hayes," Rodriguez covered the retreat. He grabbed Cavara's arm, pulling her alongside him as they broke from the line of fire. The ground trembled beneath the charge of clawed feet. Every breath was fire in his lungs. The transport was too far. The swarm was too fast. He scanned the terrain, heart hammering, until he saw it, a dark mouth of rock in the cliffside to the east. "There," he shouted, dragging Cavara toward it. "The cave move." They sprinted, weapons blasting behind them as the swarm howled. The sky above cracked with lightning, thunder rolling like war drums. By the time they dove into the cave entrance, The storm broke, in full sheets of rain slamming down, forming a shimmering curtain across the opening. Breathless, Will shoved his back against the stone wall, rifle raised. The creatures screeched outside, frustrated, but did not follow through. The storm. Their cries echoed across the ravine until the storm's roar drowned them out. "Looks like we're stuck here," he said between breaths, lowering his weapon. The beam from his helmet cut across the cavern, revealing a tunnel stretching deep. Into shadow Cavara scanned quickly, her hands trembling despite her calm tone. No skrill signatures inside. We should be safe. Will exhaled hard, removing his helmet, sweat plastering his hair. A shallow cut marked his cheek, blood trailing down his jaw. Cavara noticed immediately, her crimson face tightening. "You're injured," she whispered, stepping closer. Her slender fingers brushed the wound, light as starlight. "It's nothing," he said, though his voice softened under her touch. For a moment, the storm outside ceased to matter. The cave seemed smaller, warmer, as though the walls themselves leaned closer around them. Cavara's hand lingered on his face, her silver eyes searching his. The calm scientist, the efficient specialist, was nowhere to be found, only a woman shaken by danger, her composure breaking in the intimacy of survival. "You did well out there," Will said quietly, his voice rough. "Kept your cool." Her lips parted, uncertain. "Lians are trained for emergencies. But her words faltered. Will reached out, his gloved hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to pretend with me. You were scared. So was I." The honesty between them hung like a live wire. Slowly, Will unclasped the heavy plates of his armor, piece by piece, setting them against the wall. The undersuit beneath clung to him, black fabric mapping every hard line of muscle. Cavara's eyes betrayed her as they lingered, her pulse quickening in her throat. "You're staring," he said with a crooked smile, the tension easing just slightly. She blinked, heat rushing to her cheeks. "I was observing human anatomy. For scientific purposes." "Of course," he teased, voice dropping low. "And what does science say?" Her lips curved despite herself, silver lashes lowering. "That it is impressive." Silence thickened again, but not from fear, from something heavier, something alive between them. Will stepped closer, closing the space. His eyes never left hers. "What about Lian anatomy? Worth observing too?" Her breath caught. "Perhaps, though I lack comparative data." He leaned closer, his voice almost a whisper. "We could remedy that." The storm outside raged, lightning splintering across the sky, thunder shaking the walls. But inside the cave, the only sound was their breaths, shallow, quick, mingling. Cavara raised a trembling hand, touching the cut on his cheek again. His larger hand covered hers, holding it against his face. Their eyes locked, two worlds colliding in a moment neither had prepared for. Then his lips met hers. It was tentative at first, questioning, fragile. But when she responded, arms circling his neck, the kiss deepened with fire neither could deny. Months of restraint, laughter, and curiosity erupted into something raw and undeniable. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Will's forehead pressed to hers. "I've wanted to do that since the first time I saw you," he murmured. "Even though I am not human," she whispered, vulnerability shaking her voice. "Because you're you," he answered simply. Her heart fluttered wildly. She drew him back into another kiss, fiercer this time, her crimson body pressed to his, her silver hair tangling in his fingers. The cave around them faded. The storm outside was forgotten. There was only this two beings from different stars, discovering each other in the dark. The storm outside the cave had not relented. It roared like a living beast, its voice echoing through the stone corridors. Rain poured in shimmering sheets at the entrance, sealing Will and Cavara in a world of shadows, lightning, and their own pounding hearts. The thermal blanket he had spread on the cave floor softened the jagged stone beneath them. A small oasis against the wild fury outside. Cavara's lips tingled from the kiss, her chest rising and falling in uneven rhythm. She had known duty, discipline, and the cold certainty of logic all her life, but never this. Never the trembling in her hands, the heat rushing across her. Crimson skin, the sensation of being both exposed and alive at once. Will sat close, his face half lit by the pale beam of his suit lamp, half swallowed by shadow. His eyes never left her, as if daring her to regret what had just passed between them. She didn't. Every instinct in her people's teachings told her this was reckless. Taboo, a distraction from logic and responsibility, yet nothing in her heart felt truer. Her voice was quiet, almost carried away by the thunder. Show me more. Will's brows lifted, his lips curving into a smile. More, she nodded, the silver of her hair falling forward like a curtain. You said, humans. You have different ways. Positions, expressions. I want to understand. He exhaled, his throat tightening as if the storm had found its way inside him. Cavara, it's not just about mechanics. For us, it's about connection, emotion, trust. Her crimson cheeks darkened, her words unsteady but certain. Then trust me, teach me. For a moment, silence stretched. The storm raged, water hammered against stone, and somewhere distant, the skrill shrieked into the night. Yet here, in the cave, a different kind of electricity pulsed between them. Will reached out slowly, giving her the chance to pull away. She didn't. His hand slid along her jaw, rough fingertips gentle against smooth crimson skin. Their lips met again, and this time there was no hesitation. Her body leaned into his, warm and eager, as though every barrier she had built across her life had crumbled with the storm. When his hand traced the line of her back, Cavara's breath hitched. She broke the kiss just long enough to murmur against his mouth, voice trembling with a mix of shyness and daring. Is this where humans sometimes begin? Will chuckled softly, his forehead pressed to hers. It's one way. She tilted, her head, silver eyes bright, and the one you called doggy style. Was that truly real? The words struck him like lightning. The joke, the laughter, the memory of her on all fours, innocent and unknowing. He'd flared through him at the thought, but he forced himself to breathe steady. Yeah, it's real. Cavara swallowed, her throat working visibly. Then, with deliberate grace, she shifted back on the blanket and lowered herself onto her hands and knees, turning to glance at him over her shoulder. Like this? She asked softly. Will's heart slammed in his chest. She wasn't laughing now. There was no innocence in her expression, only curiosity and a trust so raw it made his chest ache. He moved closer, careful, reverent. His voice was low, husky. Yes, exactly like that. A shiver ran through her. Strange, how something I mocked feels so powerful. He knelt behind her, hand steadying at her waist, his breath warm against her ear when he leaned forward. Because it's not just a position, it's intimacy, vulnerability, desire. Lightning split the sky outside, the cave glowing for an instant, as if the universe itself bore witness. Their bodies moved together, slowly, cautiously, until Cavara gasped, her fingers clawing at the blanket. She had never known her people's cold. Clinical approach could be replaced by this heat and fire. Tenderness laced with hunger. Will guided her with patience, his voice low and soothing, explaining, showing, making every motion a lesson wrapped in passion. She whispered questions, stammering, then laughed breathlessly at herself. He answered with lips, with hands, with a care that made her chest ache. Time lost all meaning. The storm outside could have lasted minutes or hours, but within that cave, they discovered more than rituals or positions. They discovered each other, when at last they collapsed together. Cavara lay curled against Will's chest, her silver hair damp with sweat, her skin glowing as if lit from within. She pressed her ear to his chest, listening to the steady thrum of his heart. The sound comforted her in a way she had no words for, like a tether in the chaos of the galaxy. "So that," she murmured, tracing circles on his skin with a slender finger, "is what humans mean by intimacy." Will kissed the crown of her head, his arm wrapping tight around her. "That's one way. But it's never just physical. It's emotional. A bond." She lifted her head, her silver eyes searching his. "Is that what this is? A bond?" His gaze was steady, unflinching. "Yes." Her breath caught, her chest tightening as though the storm itself had lodged inside her ribs. A bond, a word her people used for contracts, for obligations. Yet here, it meant something different, something alive, fragile, and precious. Before she could answer, her scanner chirped faintly where it lay discarded beside her pack. She sat up, frowning, reaching for it. The storm's static still filled most of the readouts. But one signal cut through clear, a long-range pulse from the base. "They're searching for us," she whispered. Will propped himself on an elbow, watching her. The reality of their world rushed back, protocols, missions, commanders. Outside this cave, their bond would be questioned, dissected, forbidden. He touched her hand gently, grounding her. "Whatever happens out there, I don't regret this, not 1 second." Cavara's lips curved into a trembling smile. "Nor do I." They dressed in silence, though every brush of fingers, every glance, carried more meaning than words. As they prepared to return to the world, the storm eased, rain thinning into mist. At the mouth of the cave, Cavara paused, looking back once more at the blanket, the shadows, the place where she had learned what her people had never taught her. Then she stepped into the dawn beside him. The storm had passed, but something else had begun, something far more dangerous, and far more beautiful. The halls of Eco 17 hummed with sterile light and the low thrum of machinery when Will and Cavara returned. The storm had washed them clean but not hidden, the way their steps lingered too close, the way their glances carried weight. To others, they were simply soldiers back from a dangerous mission. To themselves, they carried a secret, alive as fire. Protocol demanded medical scans for all expedition survivors. Dr. Parsons was waiting when they entered the infirmary, his sharp eyes scanning the pair as though reading truths neither of them dared to voice. 3 days out in the southern quadrant, he muttered, activating the wall console. Exposure risk. Environmental toxins. Sit, both of you. Cavara slid onto the examination table, folding her long crimson arms with practiced composure. Will stood beside her, every muscle taut, his rifle still slung across his shoulder as though refusing to let go of the battlefield. Parsons began with the usual diagnostics: vital signs, cellular resonance, immunity levels. His brow furrowed, deepening with each flick of the holographic display. He adjusted, recalibrated, scanned again. Finally, he muttered to himself, "Remarkable, unprecedented." Will stiffened. "Doc, you planning to share with the class?" Parsons' dark eyes gleamed with a mixture of disbelief and wonder. "According to these readings, your physiologies, yours and Specialist Cavara's, are far more compatible than we ever theorized." Cavara blinked, her composed facade cracking. "Compatible in what sense?" "In almost every sense," Parsons said, pacing now, his hands flying as if the science itself burned to be spoken. "Cellular structures, protein synthesis, bioelectric signatures. You're different, yes, but the overlaps are extraordinary, almost as though your species were designed to interlock." Will frowned. "Designed? You mean coincidence?" The doctor hesitated. "Perhaps, but coincidence doesn't explain this." He tapped the final readout. "Your reproductive markers align." The words fell like a thunderclap. Cavara's silver eyes widened, her face paling to a lighter crimson. Will froze, unable to process. Parsons pressed on. oblivious to the weight of his revelation. Theoretically, you could produce viable offspring. Do you realize what this means? Two intelligent species, biologically capable of enough, Will snapped, stepping between the doctor and Cavara. His voice was steel. She's not a specimen. She's not an experiment. The doctor flinched at the command in his tone, but his excitement only dimmed slightly. You don't understand, Commander. This discovery could change the future of human-alien relations. It could, I said. Enough. Will's hand hovered near his rifle, not as a threat, but as raw instinct. The silence afterward was suffocating. Cavara's breath came shallow, her gaze fixed on the floor. Parsons finally exhaled, running a hand over his face. Fine. You're both cleared for duty. But this goes in the record. Command will know. They left the infirmary without a word. The corridors of Eco 17 felt suddenly too narrow, too exposed. Every passing crew member seemed to glance too long, as though guessing secrets. Only when Will pulled her into the shadow of a side corridor did Cavara finally speak. Her voice was low, trembling, but fierce. Do you see what this means? If the Directorate learns of this, they will drag me back in chains. Interbreeding is a crime among my people. It is contamination. Will gripped her shoulders, his eyes burning into hers. Then let them try. They'll have to go through me first. Her lips trembled, her composure breaking. You don't understand. To them, I would be a shame, an outcast, a corruption of lineage. And you, she swallowed. You would be branded reckless, dangerous. They would use us as tools, tear us apart in the name of science. He lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. Listen to me. What happened in that cave? It was real. I don't care what Parsons says, what your Directorate says, what anyone says. They can't take that from us. They can't take you from me. Her breath hitched, her silver lashes shimmering with unshed tears. Then, with a suddenness that startled him, she threw her arms around his neck, pressing her face to his chest. For the first time, Cavara, the logical, disciplined specialist, allowed herself to break. I would risk everything, she whispered. I would defy them all, for you. Will held her tight, his jaw clenched against the flood of emotion. Then we face it together. They remained like that, until the station intercom shattered the fragile moment. Priority 1. Captain Reynolds' voice crackled through the speakers. Commander Travis and Specialist Cavara Port 2. Command immediately. They pulled apart, still clutching hands as if unwilling to let go, in the command center. The holodisplay dominated the room, flickering with images of the void. 2 ships had entered orbit. One bore the insignia of Earth, command-sleek, metallic, scientific. The other was unmistakably Lian, sharp lines, silver hull, glowing with cold authority. Captain Reynolds' face was grave. They both request immediate docking clearance. Both demand to speak with you too, and I don't like the timing one bit. Will's stomach sank. Parsons' report. Reynolds gave a grim nod. It traveled faster than either of you. The holoscreen shifted, the ships growing larger as they approached Eco 17. The human vessel announced itself as a routine scientific expedition. The Lian cruiser gave no reason beyond urgent diplomatic concern. Beside Will Cavara's hand trembled in her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed her fear. The walls were closing in, the secret they had shared in laughter, in storm, in passion, was no longer theirs. Reynolds lowered his voice, his gaze fixed on them. Whatever's going on between you two, you'd better get your story straight, because by the time those airlocks open, this isn't personal anymore. It's politics. And politics eats people alive. Will's jaw tightened. He glanced at Cavara, his thumb brushing the back of her trembling hand. Her eyes met his, silver fire flashing with both fear and defiance. He leaned closer, his voice a promise carved from steel. No matter what happens, I won't let them take you from me. For the first time since leaving her homeworld, Cavara smiled through her fear. And I won't let them take you, either. The docking alarms blared, red lights bathing the command deck in a bloody glow. The ships were here. The doors to their secret were about to be forced open, and far beyond, in the depths of ravines, something else, stirred Skrill movements greater than any recorded before, but neither of them knew that yet. For now, the only certainty was this: their love had just become the center of two civilizations' attention. The docking alarms still echoed through the steel corridors of Eco 17, when the storm broke again. Only this time, it wasn't weather, it was war. The command deck shook violently, monitors flickering as if the very walls recoiled. Captain Reynolds gripped the rail, his voice a steady bark over the chaos. Status report. The tactical officer's face drained of color. Skrill swarm inbound. Largest we've ever recorded. Thousands. Commander. There, everywhere. On the main display, the barren landscape of Eco 17 came alive with movement. The ravines churned with black, chitinous bodies, mandibles clicking in unison, their alien exoskeletons glistening like oil under the stormy twilight. They advanced in a tide that swallowed the horizon itself. Cavara's breath hitched. Her scanner pulsed violently. The data spiked nearly off. The charts. They've evolved, she whispered. This isn't migration. It's coordination. Reynolds' eyes cut to Will. If they breach the perimeter, the station falls. Your ground commander, Travis. Make it count. Will's jaw tightened. He turned to Cavara, catching her trembling hand just for a second. The weight of everything, their bond, their secret. The incoming delegations pressed down on them, but his voice was steady. Stay in the command deck. Sink the station defenses. I'll lead the teams outside. Cavara wanted to protest, to fight the order, but her training pulled her into motion. I'll link the human and Leon tactical systems. If we coordinate, maybe we can hold them. The docking bays opened with a hiss as Will and his squad stormed out into the dying light. The air was electric with ozone and alien cries. His rifle hummed in his grip, and behind him, human soldiers formed ranks, eyes wide but steady. Then the Lians arrived. Commander Terran strode at their head, silver hair cropped close, his crimson face sharp with authority. He moved with his elite guard, their crystalline rifles gleaming. His gaze locked on Will as they converged at the outer defenses. You lead us into this. Terran's voice carried contempt and curiosity in equal measure. You want to survive? You follow my plan. Will shot back. He pointed to the tactical projection on his wrist display. Your people hold the upper levels. Precision fire. My teams stay mobile. Draw them in. Break their formations. Terran frowned. A scatter formation. Wasteful. Will's eyes blazed. It works. These things adapt. You stay static, you die. Move with me, or get out of the way. For a long second, Terran studied him. Then, with the smallest nod, he signaled his squad. Very well. Show me your human tactics. The battlefield erupted. The Skrill swarmed across the rocky plain, thousands of clawed limbs scraping the ground in a symphony of nightmares. Energy bolts lit the darkness, carving through black carapets. Explosions shook the ground as human. Grenades scattered the first wave, but for every Skrill that fell, 3 more surged forward. Will moved like fire through smoke, barking orders, pivoting squads, cutting down attackers with ruthless efficiency. Alpha team flank Eastridge. Beta suppressed. Main advance. Don't let them circle. Above, the Leon snipers unleashed shimmering beams of crystalline energy, precise and devastating. Cavara's voice came through Will's calm but urgent, redirecting power to east turrets. Synchronizing fire with Leon pattern Delta. Hold the line, Will. Her voice steadied him, even as chaos roared. Every glimpse of her on the tactical feed reminded him why he fought. The swarm pressed harder, and then the ground shook with something new. From the tide emerged creatures larger than tanks, their armored shells thicker, their movements disturbingly deliberate. Alpha Skrill, variants Will had never seen. New signatures. Cavara cried, overcomes, panic bleeding into her voice. Commanders, these ones are directing the swarm. They're intelligent. Will's eyes narrowed. All teams, focus. Fire on the big ones. Drop them, and the rest scatter. But the Alpha Skrill proved resilient. Blasts ricocheted off their carapaces, their massive limbs swatting soldiers aside like insects. And worse, they shrieked in tones that shifted the swarm's movements. Coordinating attacks on weak points, one section of the perimeter buckled under the assault. The creatures poured through, driving toward the station's life support systems. Junction 7 breached, Rodriguez shouted. Will's blood iced. If they reached life support, the station was finished. He turned to Turan, his voice cutting through the din. You and me, Junction 7, now. Turan bristled, but saw the necessity. With curt precision, he and his guard moved with Will, fighting through the chaos. Blasts tore through the night, the cries of men and monsters weaving into one endless scream. They reached the junction just as 3 Alpha Skrill burst through a shattered wall. Their claws gleamed with alien ichor, their mandibles dripping venom. On your left, Will shouted, diving forward. His body moved before thought, instinct, training, desperation. One Alpha lunged at Terran, claws descending. Will slammed into him, shoving him out of the way. The creature's strike tore into Will instead, ripping through armor. Blood spraying into the dust. He fell hard, the world flashing white. The Skrill loomed over him, ready to finish. But Terran, eyes wide with shock, turned his weapon and unleashed a crystalline blast that shattered the beast into burning fragments. His guards finished the others in a hail of light. Will lay in the wreckage, armor torn, crimson staining the earth beneath him. His breaths were ragged, shallow. Commander, Cavara's voice screamed through the comm. Will, she was already running. Against Reynolds' orders, against all reason, she sprinted through the corridors. Her scanner forgotten, only his voice guiding her. She burst into the battlefield, the air heavy with smoke and alien cries. Soldiers shouted after her, but she barely heard them. She reached him just as the medics did, her crimson hands cradling his face. His eyes flickered open, dazed, unfocused. Cavara. He rasped, blood on his lips. Don't talk, she whispered fiercely, tears burning down her cheeks. Stay with me. Just stay. His hand, trembling and slick with blood, found hers. Worth it, he murmured, a ghost of a smile on his face. You're worth it. Her heart shattered. Around them, the battle still raged, but in that moment, the galaxy narrowed to just the two of them. Medical evac. Now, Reynolds bellowed, his voice raw, over COMMs. As the medics lifted him onto a stretcher, Cavara clung to his hand, refusing to let go. The soldier who had saved her, kissed her, taught her how intimacy was more than mechanics, now lay bleeding because he had thrown himself into death's jaws for someone else, for her. The swarm still howled in the distance. The station still burned. The political delegations still loomed above, but none of it mattered in that moment. All Cavara could think was that if Will Travis's heart stopped, hers would stop with it. And somewhere deep inside, she realized she had broken every law of her people. She didn't care. She loved him. The medical bay of Eco 17 had never felt so suffocating. The hiss of respirators, the steady pulse of monitors, the shuffle of medics, it all blurred together into a single noise that hammered at Cavara's chest. She sat rigidly at Will's bedside, her crimson fingers wrapped around his larger hand, watching the rise and fall of his chest beneath the bandages. Dr. Parsons moved between consoles, his tone clinical, though his eyes betrayed unease. He's stable for now. The lacerations were severe, but his physiology is stronger than most. Enhanced recovery factors, It saved his life. Cavara could barely hear him. Her focus was on Will's pale face, the flicker of his eyelids as if each breath was fought for. Her own kind had always dismissed emotion as distraction, yet here, she was trembling with fear that threatened to break her. Behind her, the door hissed open. Commander Terran entered with 2 guards, his uniform spattered with both Skrill, Ichor, and Will's blood. He stopped at the foot of the bed, his eyes sharp, unreadable. For a long time, he said nothing, only studying the man who had thrown himself into death's path to save him. Finally, his voice cut through the silence. He saved me. Cavara's throat tightened. She looked up sharply. Yes, she said, her voice brittle, without hesitation. Terran's gaze lingered on Will, then shifted to her. Our directorate warned me of your attachments. They sent me to retrieve you. To end this. His crimson features hardened. But what I witnessed today makes me question everything we believe about humans. Cavara rose slowly, her silver hair cascading down her shoulders, her body trembling with restrained fury. Do you see him lying there, bleeding, broken, because he valued your life as much as his own? And you would call this attachment shameful? Terran's jaw clenched, the silence stretched. Then, surprisingly, his expression softened. Perhaps I would call it something else. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. Nobility or madness? I am not sure which. Cavara stared at him, her heart pounding. To my people, both words mean the same. The silence broke when Will stirred. A faint groan escaped his lips. His fingers twitched in hers, and his eyes flickered open, glassy, but searching Cavara. His voice was hoarse, cracked with pain. She bent close instantly, pressing her forehead to his. I'm here. You're safe. He tried to smile, though it twisted with weakness. Did we win? You saved the station, she whispered, fiercely. You saved everyone. His eyes drifted toward Terran, and a spark of humor broke through his exhaustion. Even you. The Lian commander inclined his head stiffly, his voice almost grudging. Yes, even me. Parsons cleared his throat. He needs rest. Days of it. No strain, no stress. But rest would not come. Not with the political delegations. Pressing like vultures. Hours later, the command center pulsed with tension. The Earth vessel had docked, its officers demanding data. The Lian cruiser had sent word. Specialist Cavara was to return immediately. Under order of her directorate, Captain Reynolds gathered the senior officers, Cavara among them. Will remained in recovery, against his protests. The atmosphere was thick, the stakes clearer than ever. Reynolds' voice was sharp. Earth Command wants research. The Lians want obedience. And we, he jabbed a finger at the map of Eco 17 projected above the table. We need peace. Our station, barely, survived tonight. Another swarm like that, and we're finished. Terran stood at the edge of the room, arms folded, his face grim. When he spoke, it was measured, deliberate. Your human commander displayed more honor than any calculation predicted. My people will not ignore this. Cavara turned sharply. What do you mean? Terran's eyes flicked to her. I will recommend to the directorate a compromise, a joint initiative, a trial bond, formally recognized between human and Lian. The room fell silent. Reynolds blinked. A bond? Like a diplomatic program. Terran inclined his head. Precisely. If Cavara and Commander Travis are willing, they may serve as an experiment, a bridge. Cavara's heart pounded. She knew what he meant, even if he softened the words. A sanctioned union, a way to transform what they had into something political, protective. Recognized her. Lips trembled. And if we refuse, then the directorate will recall you, Terran said flatly. And Earth's command will take your commander apart in a laboratory. Reynolds swore under his breath. Hell of a choice. Cavara's fists clenched. She looked to the door, toward the medbay, where Will lay recovering. She could still hear his voice, strained but certain. "I don't regret this." Hours later, when she returned to his side, the decision weighed on her chest like stone. He was awake now, propped slightly against the bed, the color creeping faintly back into his cheeks. His eyes lit when he saw her, weak but steady. "You came back," he murmured. "Always," she whispered, sitting beside him. She hesitated, then told him everything. The delegations, Turan's proposal, the bond. Will listened in silence, his gaze locked on hers. Finally, he asked, "What do you want?" Her voice cracked. "I want you. Even if it means defying everything I was raised to believe. But if this bond protects you, then, perhaps." Her words faltered. "Perhaps it is the only way." Will reached for her hand, his grip weak but warm. "Then we do it, on our terms, not theirs." Her silver eyes shimmered, her heart pulling in two directions: fear and hope, duty and love. She leaned forward, pressing her lips softly to his. In that fragile kiss, she realized something undeniable. The storm outside had nearly killed them. Politics threatened to tear them apart. But together, they were something new, something neither human nor Lian tradition could define. Later, as the formal summons came from both delegations, Cavara whispered against his ear, fierce and certain, "If they want a bond, then let us show them one they will never forget." And in the shadows of the station, as whispers spread of the human who saved a Lian commander and the Lian who stood by his side, the galaxy tilted closer toward change. The observation deck of Eco-17 had been transformed into something it had never been before. Normally it was all steel and glass, utilitarian, made for tactical briefings and star charts. Tonight, banners hung from the rafters, Earth's flag, alongside the lion crest, human flowers arranged beside crystalline sculptures that shimmered with alien light. The room buzzed with tension as delegates from both ships filled the space, whispering, calculating, watching. At the center stood a platform draped in pale fabric, and on it, Commander Turan, expression severe, stood as officiator. For the first time, his voice carried something softer than command. "Today marks a precedent neither of our peoples foresaw. A trial bond, human and Lian, standing together, witnessed, tested, judged." All eyes turned as the doors opened. Will Travis entered first, dressed not in combat armor, but in a ceremonial uniform that felt stiff and awkward on his broad frame. He moved carefully, his wounds still fresh, though healed enough for him to walk unassisted. Every step drew the gaze of humans and lions alike, some with admiration, others with suspicion. And then Cavara followed. She wore silver ceremonial robes, tailored with subtle human touches, softer lines, a sash of midnight blue, the faint shimmer of woven crystal threads that caught the light. Her silver hair was braided back, her crimson skin glowing as if lit from within. She looked every inch the symbol they wanted her to be, but when her eyes found Will's, she smiled not for the crowd, but only for him. Will's breath caught, for all the chaos, the politics, the fear. This was the only truth that mattered, her, walking toward him, across every boundary of species and law. They met at the platform, their hands finding each other's as though nothing else in the galaxy existed. Turan's voice carried over the assembly. "This is not merely ceremony. This is trial. If they succeed, it will change the course of human and Lian relations. If they fail," his eyes lingered on Cavara, then on Will, "it will prove our traditions right." The delegates shifted, murmuring, but silence returned as the ritual began. The first part was Lian, the binding cord woven of crystal threads. Terran draped it over their clasped hands, intoning words in his own language about unity and trial, logic and trust. "Cavara," repeated the vow fluently, her voice steady, though her heart thundered. Then came the human part, vows spoken in English. Will's voice was rough, but clear. I vowed to stand with you, Cavara, against storms, against swarms, against anyone who dares to tear us apart. Not as commander and specialist, not as human and Leanne, but as us. Gasps rippled through the Leanne delegation, unused to such raw, emotional words spoken in public. But Cavara lifted her chin, meeting his gaze. And I vow, she answered softly, her voice carrying across the hall, to defy logic for you, Will Travis, to let emotion guide me, even when it is forbidden, to make our bond stronger than any law. The cord glowed faintly, resonating with the heat of their joined hands, as if the very materials of two worlds recognized something true. Then came the final act, the human tradition Cavara herself had requested. A kiss. The room shifted uneasily. Among humans, some smiled, proud. Among Leanne's, some stiffened in scandalized silence. But Will bent to her, and Cavara rose to meet him, their lips joining in a kiss, not just of love, but of defiance. The murmur rose into uproar, but in that moment, they didn't hear it. For them, it was the completion of everything that had begun with laughter in a quiet room. When they parted, Cavara whispered just for him, her lips brushing his ear. Now, the galaxy knows what I already did. You are mine. The reception that followed was strained, but undeniable. Humans and Leanne's shared tables, exchanged cautious conversation, music from both worlds mingling. Delegates observed, whispered, argued. Terran himself remained watchful, but when he passed Will and Cavara, his voice was low. Perhaps madness, perhaps greatness. Time will decide. Later, as the hall emptied, Will and Cavara slipped away into the quiet of their newly shared quarters. The tension of politics drained the moment the door sealed behind them. Cavara leaned against the wall, exhaling shakily. It is done. We are bonded, recognized. Will approached her slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. And how do you feel? Her silver eyes softened. Like my heart is no longer mine alone. She pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady beat beneath her palm. It belongs here. He drew her close, kissing her hair, her forehead, her lips. Then we'll carry each other's, always. For a while, silence reigned between them, broken only by their breathing, the hum of the station, the faint memory of storm winds beyond the glass. They undressed slowly, tenderly, no armor, no uniforms, only themselves. The cords of the ceremony still lay on the table, shimmering faintly, as if watching over them. Cavara traced the scars across his chest with her slender fingers, reverent. Every one of these tells a story, and every one led me here, Will answered, his hand tangling in her silver hair. Their bodies met again, not with the desperation of the cave, but with the certainty of a bond sealed before two civilizations. They laughed together, they whispered, they loved, and somewhere in the middle of it, Cavara, with playful mischief, dropped onto her hands and knees, glancing back at him with silver eyes that sparkled. Perhaps, she said, her voice tinged with innocence and fire all at once, you should remind me again of this earth custom, for cultural accuracy. Will laughed, his heart so full he thought it might burst. Doggy style. You really want to bring that up now? She smiled wide, her voice a low purr. It started as a joke. Now, it is ours. He moved to her, his lips brushing her ear as he whispered, then let's give the galaxy a demonstration it will never forget. Their laughter filled the room, tangled with their passion, sealing the circle of everything they had endured: battles, blood, and politics. What began as innocent curiosity had become defiance, love, and history itself. Outside their window, the twin moons of Eco 17 rose, bathing the station in silver light. Somewhere below, the Skrill retreated into their dark nests, defeated for now. Somewhere above, two ships, one human, one Leanne, floated in uneasy alliance, watching, waiting, But here, in this room, there was only Will and Cavara, two beings who had crossed stars and traditions for each other. And as they finally fell into sleep, limbs entwined, hearts steady, one truth remained undeniable. A joke had changed everything.